What's up, everybody? It's Hank here with Break MMA. Should be a really fun episode today as I have another MMA journalist on the show with me today, James Lynch. How are you, James?
I'm doing awesome, man. Thanks so much for having me.
Fight week. I'm sure you got a lot of interviews going on. It's pretty hectic in fight week. Even if it's not a pay-per-view card fight week, I'm sure there's a lot going on.
Yeah, I did a lot. I usually do my interviews a couple weeks before, so I did interview a lot of fighters on this card, at least half the card for sure. So I took care of that a few weeks ago, and now I'm just doing interviews for the upcoming cards because you never want to interview fighters when they're cutting weight. It's always a bad idea.
Or when they lost. You know, I've had a bunch of people on before a loss or right after, and having them on when they're getting ready to fight is completely different than if they have that loss.
Yeah, no, never want to. I mean, just avoid it if you can, because there's a million things going on. I mean, losing a fight is worse than getting fired at a job, because only a handful of people see that. But people, if you lose a fight, everyone sees it, right? It's like it's one of those things. So I tend to avoid that unless there's a close fight and someone maybe the judges got it wrong. You want to go that route, but generally I don't interview anyone off a loss.
Right. Did you talk to Cowboy and Perry coming up to this?
I did not talk to Cowboy. I did talk to Perry. So Perry was doing a media scrum in Vegas when I was there for UFC 229. So, I talked to him a bit about that and his preparations and everything. And it should be a good fight. And of course, obviously, the drama there with, Cowboy leaving Jackson Winklejohn. And I've talked to some of, Perry's teammates at Jackson's. And there's a lot of bad blood there. So I wonder if that's going to spill over into the cage just with, everything that's going into the fight.
Definitely. We'll start right there. We'll start with Perry and Cowboy. Who do you have? Who's your pick?
My pick is Mike Perry, and it's just based off the fact that, Perry has not sustained as much damage as Donald Cowboy Cerrone has in his career. I think if you look at the two fighters on paper, I think Cerrone's, a lot more accomplished, and he's more well-rounded. But Perry's got that power. I think Perry really showed that he can stick around in the welterweight division with that win over Paul Felder. I know Felder moved up a weight class, but Felder's still very talented at lightweight, so I consider that a really good win for him. And with Cowboy, I mean, he's just had a lot of wear and tear. His last fight against Leon Edwards, apparently he was injured going into the fight, but that was not a good performance. I know it's Leon Edwards, but at the end of the day, he's got to start winning some of these fights, and I think just the amount of damage he's taken and the frequency that he's fought, I think that just puts him at a disadvantage in this fight, and I think Perry will be the fresher fighter. He's also the guy who's not, having this whole situation with Cowboy leaving. It's like you're basically seeing an ex-girlfriend again, and that's got to play in your mind a little bit, right? So I think with Perry, he doesn't have to worry about that at all. With Cowboy, I mean, he seriously has some hate on for Mike Winklejohn, and that has to play into this fight a little bit. So I just think all the advantages here are to Mike Perry.
I'm going Cowboy on this one just because, like you said, Perry, he's a fucking bull. You can't hurt him. I mean, you punch him in the head. He's never been knocked out, I don't believe, and not in the UFC. And I see Cowboy winning by decision. I see a classic leg kick strategy, kick Perry, keep him at bay, hit him with some, Cowboy body kicks, maybe throw in a Cowboy head kick here or there. I see Cowboy's experience being too much, and I'm a huge Perry fan. That guy comes, like he said in his interviews, I come to crush your skull. I just think with Cowboy, I think Cowboy's going to turn into a kickboxing match, and I think Cowboy is a whole nother level of kickboxer, which, people who would agree, because Perry's not really a kicker. Perry, he don't kick much. He's more of a punches and elbows. I believe if Cowboy can turn this into a purely kickboxing point contest type of fight, it should be a Cowboy. I can't remember off the top of my head. Who's the co-main?
The co-main event is, I believe, is it Raquel Pennington and Jermaine Durandamine, or is there another fight on there? I have to look right now, actually. Yeah. I always forget.
I don't know either.
We'll do this in real time here. Because I don't want to get this wrong. Obviously, we know the main event, but the co is actually they are the co-main event is Cerrone and Perry. So the fight underneath it is Pennington and Durandamine.
That makes sense though. I think it's going to be a good fight card.
Very good fight card. I think a good showcase, too, of some of the up-and-comers. You've got Macy Barber, who, got an open workout yesterday in her UFC debut, which is pretty great. Too bad she missed weight today. That was unfortunate. You've got Devontae Smith on the undercard as well, another Contender Series winner. This is just a good showcase, I think, of some of the future talent and also some notable names in there, like a Raquel Pennington, who fought for a title, like Jermaine Durandamine, who was briefly a flyweight champion in the UFC. So you have sort of a mixed bag of a card, but I'm excited for a fight fight night card, I think fans are definitely getting their money's worth.
Yeah, that Cowboy Perry is probably what everybody's tuning in to watch, but you're going to catch a lot of up-and-comers, like you said. I think a lot of people are tuning in after that 229, because 229, obviously, the biggest pay-per-view ever, Conor Khabib. I think they've kind of carried over a little bit, because I remember before, you know how it is on live streams and pay-per-views, you try to find them and they're hard, but when you do find them, they're shitty, and it's best just buy the pay-per-view. I think we're kind of getting in the day and age where people are, okay, I'll just buy the pay-per-view. Do you think pay-per-views are doing good, or do you think that's just Conor McGregor right there?
I think it's Conor McGregor. I think the pay-per-view model these days is a tough sell. I know it works in boxing, but I think the boxing crowd generally that buys the pay-per-views is an older crowd, I think the UFC fan base is a little bit younger. They know other ways they can watch it, or they can go to a bar and watch it. And I think it's just a big ask for fans to fork out that much money every month for a pay-per-view. I think the model, they need to do something similar to what the WWE Network is doing, where, you can buy a channel or an app or something, and you get, either a discount or it included or something along those lines. Because asking fans to pay for every single pay-per-view is a big ask. I know it makes them more money that way, but I think if you really want to maintain your fan base, you get rid of the pay-per-views, or at the very least, just give them a discount if you do subscribe to other things like Fight Pass or something along those lines.
If you're a hardcore like me or you, we buy every pay-per-view, but we study every fight. We go over, we know contender series fighters, we know up-and-comers, you know what I mean? Like, we study the game. If you're a casual or somebody who isn't in-depth in the game and you see a card headlined by Rose Namajunas and Johanna, you might not buy it, rather than a card headlined by Conor and anybody else.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, and I think the UFC, a lot of times, like, they are banking on name value, but we've seen pay-per-views that haven't been so good. I mean, the Chicago card didn't have a good buy rate. I think people are just, unless it's Conor or a bigger name. Like, I'm curious about this Toronto card, if the numbers are going to do well, because from our point of view, it's a fantastic card. Is a Max Holloway going to translate to the casual fan? Is a Joanna going to translate to a casual fan? I would think so to a certain degree, but I don't know what the buy rate's going to be for that one. But at the end of the year, you have John Jones. I think that will do quite well, because everyone knows who John Jones is. More so, I think, for his out of cage antics as opposed to his accomplishments in the cage. But either way, I think the pay-per-view model these days is pretty tough to sell to fans.
And I'm gonna say, since you brought it up, and I just briefly go over it, I think Gus is going to beat John. I mean, it's not out of the realm. It's not. Mm-hmm. It's not like I watched that first fight. I've got it on DVD. 165, I believe it was. John Jones, Gustafsson won. I thought that it was close. It was a close decision, obviously, for John. But I think John's not fought in 2 years or a year, somewhere in there, a year or two, and it's gonna be rough. Gustafsson hits hard. Gustafsson's long. He hits hard, and he's very unorthodox. The fight with Glover Teixeira comes to mind, when he just blasted Glover with those uppercuts and put him out. I think that Gustafsson's going to shock John in this fight.
It's entirely possible. I mean, the issue here is that it's not just Jones who has the layoff. Gustafsson does as well. Jones has actually fought sooner than Gustafsson. So, I mean, we can throw the layout thing out the window. But then the question is, what has John been doing on his suspension? Has he been getting better? I mean, we don't really know. He's still relatively young as far as his career goes. And Gustafsson, I mean, he's taken some damage in some fights. The Anthony Johnson fight comes to mind. We'll see. I mean, that fight was super close. I was cage side for it. It was in Toronto where I used to live. And, I mean, that fight could have gone either way. But then Jones claims he was partying. So we don't know. I mean, it's such a big fight for a number of different reasons. But I don't think anyone can confidently say that one guy is going to win over the other, because there's just too many variables heading into the fight.
Definitely. It's kind of a pick-em. It's a pick-em, but if I had to bet, or if I was going to go, I'd probably go with Gus, just because I got a feeling. It's one of those MMA feelings you get. And
yeah, no, I hear you. Should put some money on it. I think he's the underdog right now. So
definitely the biggest news, probably, that I can remember in a long time in MMA is this trade. Ben Askren, Mighty Mouse. I come out on my podcast the day of when it was announced. I remember I got up on Twitter and I looked at it, and I was like, why in the hell would you trade Demetrius Johnson, pound for pound great? If he's not number one, he's number two. If he's not number two, he's definitely number three. And you trade him for Ben Askren, who is 18-0, who's undefeated, but with no disrespect, I've watched all his fights. I like him a lot. Great personality, shit talker. He's a more boring version of GSP. to me, GSP is more entertaining. GSP, George had that long jab he'd hit you with, and he beat a lot of people striking besides wrestling. Ben is a wrestler, but the wrestling is dominant. But I told my guest that day, I said, if one calls me, I'm the UFC, and one calls me and says, hey, I'll give you Ben Askren, you give me Mighty Mouse, I hang up the phone. I said that one definitely won this. UFC, you got a good fighter, you got a great fighter, but you didn't get a pay-per-view draw. Ben Askren is not going to draw a million pay-per-views. He's just not. You put him against GSP, it's going to be big. It's not going to be Conor Khabib big. It's not going to be Conor Nate big. Ben Askren, in my opinion, and I'm sure you would probably agree, he's not going to be that Conor McGregor of the UFC. Nowhere near it.
No, he'll be more like a Colby Covington, a more intelligent Colby Covington, I would think, is sort of a better comparison. But you mentioned the pay-per-view buys. I mean, Demetrius didn't do great pay-per-view buys either. I mean, that's what this comes down to. As far as who wins the trade, I think one wins the trade in terms of skill. I mean, they have, like you said, the best pound-for-pound fighter. And as far as entertainment, I think the UFC gained that. Now, is Askren the most exciting guy in the world? I mean, I would waver. I would kind of disagree with you a little bit here. I think there's some fights that he's had that are entertaining. Not all of them have been. But it doesn't matter because he sells himself so well. I mean, look at the rampage he went on Twitter, calling out all the welterweights. I think this is a guy that is bringing new life into the welterweight division, where it's been sort of at this standstill with Woodley and kind of having issues with the, Woodley and the fans and everything. This is a nice injection of life in there on top of what we already have with Colby Covington. So I think, from an entertainment perspective outside the cage, the UFC definitely won this because it brings more intrigue to the welterweight division. And for one, they win because, for them, the Japanese fans appreciate the lighter weight classes a lot more. They're going to tune in more. I think it's really a win-win for everyone to a certain degree. And I think for Demetrius, he didn't have anything to gain. Even if him not fighting TJ, it doesn't bother me at all. I think, he what he did at Flyweight speaks for itself. I thought he beat Henry Cejudo. So really, if that's the case, if we're basing this off the fact that Demetrius, won that fight against Cejudo, what does he got to accomplish? You want him to fight Ray Borg again, or Benavidez again? I mean, there's just no interest. So I think him moving on was the best for his career. And I think for Askren, we finally get that question mark answered, which is how would he do in the UFC?
Yeah, and that on that same podcast, and I posted this, and I called it to a T. We were going over Askren's first fight, and I said, don't give him somebody in the top 5. Give him somewhere between 7 and 9. And I believe that's what they did. I'm not sure what Robbie is ranked, but I know he's in the top 10. He's got to be. And do you have what Robbie's ranked right now?
Well, I'm going to look it up right now here on the rankings. I believe he was top 5. That was the whole thing, was that Askren wanted a top 5 guy, and of course there's a lot of people already tied up. So you've got Covington. That was never going to happen because Covington's going to fight Woodley. You've got Darren Till, which I thought would have made sense, but is Till going up to middleweight? Maybe that's why that fight didn't happen. You've got RDA who's fighting Kamaru Usman, and you've got Stephen Thompson, and you've got Lawler. So really it was a pick between Thompson and Lawler. I'll be honest, I like this fight in terms of where it should give us a good indication where Askren fits in the division fighting Lawler. I just don't like the fact that you have this guy who's called out the entire division on Twitter, except for one guy, and that's Robbie Lawler, because Askren knows if he pops off at Lawler, Lawler's not going to say anything back. He's not a personable guy from that perspective. He's a guy who's just meat and potatoes. He gets in there. He takes care of his job. So I think the UFC actually made a mistake here booking him against Lawler because Askren's going to try and sell this the best he can. Robbie's not going to do anything. He's just going to let his fists do the talking. And there's a chance that Askren could lose this fight. So I think they should have gone with someone like Darren Till, assuming Till would have made the weight, because Till struggled with wrestlers. We saw that against the fight in the Woodley fight. And Till has a huge backing. But I think what happened was that the UFC got afraid, where it's like, if Askren beats Till, you just lose. You have one of your biggest stars in the UK losing 2 fights in a row. They can't have that happen. So I think that's why Askren's fighting Lawler.
I called it. I was interviewing the guy, and he said, I think they give him Till, or I think they give him Thompson. And I was like, I guarantee you it'll be Robbie Lawler. And he looked at me and he said, Robbie Lawler? I've never even thought about Ben Askren, Robbie Lawler. And it popped in my mind when I first thought about it, and it still, right now, it reminds me of you remember when Robbie Lawler fought Murillo Ninja? It reminds me of that. Ninja was supposed to smash Robbie. I mean, not necessarily smash, but Ninja was supposed to win. He was better jiu-jitsu, just a little bit better at the time, they thought, and Robbie knocked him out. To me, it's going to be similar. It's going to be Ben Askren shooting for takedowns, and Robbie doing the classic ruthless Robbie Lawler, fighting off takedowns, punching you in the face, stalking you, marching you down. And if I had to make a pick, I mean, I like underdogs. I'll go Lawler.
Well, I think Lawler's going to be the favorite in this fight, to be honest, because I think that just, the fact that he's a former champion, he has some pretty notable wins. I know his last fight didn't look great, but I would think that, just looking at name value, I think he's the more accomplished guy in terms of, notable opponents. So I think Askren's probably going to be the underdog. Now, if Askren's the favorite, then that might just be the power of his fans and people really coming in on the money. But I would imagine he's going to open up as the underdog, but we'll see what happens here. But here's the thing with Lawler, too, is like, he didn't look that great in that last fight against Dos Anjos, and he's got a bit of a layoff coming in. I know Askren has a layoff too, but I don't know what type of Robbie Lawler we're going to see, because the Lawler that, beat Johnny Hendricks and, beat Rory McDonald, I don't think that same Robbie Lawler still exists. We'll find out, though, when they square off in January.
We will definitely find out. I think it's a good showcase. Let's say Ben beats him, Ben gets by Robbie, then you give him maybe Wonder Boy. Let's say he beats Wonder Boy, but he's also come out and said he's not fighting Tyron. So you've got a weird spot where you're not fighting for the 100. What if you keep winning at 170? Let's say you beat 4, 3, 2, and 1. There's nobody left at 170. It's either Tyron or nobody. Then what?
Well, that's assuming Woodley stays with the UFC. I mean, I have a theory that there might be we might not see Tyron that much longer in the UFC, or he decides to move up a weight class, there's a lot of different scenarios that could play out. Like, let's say Colby fights Tyron and Tyron beats him, then you have a super fight there, basically. Well, not super fight, but it would just be an exciting matchup between Woodley and Covington. Covington and Askren. I mean, can you imagine the trash talk leading up to that? That would be amazing. So I think there are creative ways the UFC can go about this, but part of me thinks that if I'm Tyron Woodley, used to fight for Scott Coker in Strikeforce. Maybe he goes to Bellator. Their welterweight division's got a guy that has a win over Tyron Woodley and Rory McDonald. So you never know. That there's a lot of possibilities here for what could happen with Askren and the future of the sport in the welterweight division.
We shall see. One of the best things about MMA is everybody's always wondered what Ben Askren would do against UFC. We will see. Another big news is Floyd fucking Mayweather. Now, he's always talking shit. So is Conor. So is a lot of people. Dana, everybody talks shit. But Floyd went to Japan, I believe. Was it Japan?
Yeah, it was Japan, yeah.
He flew out there, and he's at a press conference, and he's standing beside the kid taking pictures, and they had him quoted saying, "I can't wait to fight this kid." And I thought that it was a fake from the get-go, and then he says, "No, it's real." And then that tension kid, they start showing his highlight reel, and I'm a diehard MMA fan, and I'd never heard of him until then. And you start watching this kid, and you're like, whoa, he's a legit kickboxer who, if Floyd is even entertaining the idea of letting this kid kick him, he's going to get wrecked. And then Floyd comes home, and we all know the tweet. I never agreed. I'm not doing it. It looks like, is it officially off? Do you know? Is it like officially done?
I mean,
did anybody try to?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, they did all these promos. I'm at this point, I'm assuming it's off just based off everything we're hearing and we're reading. And I don't know what happened here. Is this Floyd just trying to? Maybe Floyd agreed to it, and then he gets down there and he sees Tension's highlight reel, and he's like,
"No,
not for me."
Nope.
Or maybe Floyd's just trolling us all, and he's just keeping his name in the business. Look, what was the first thing that happened when Khabib won the title over Conor? Floyd got his name in there. I mean, I think he just wants to stay relevant, keep his brand out there. That might be part of it, too. I don't think we'll ever really know the answer, but as it stands right now, it looks like Floyd's not fighting on New Year's Eve.
I think it would definitely be, because when he come out, it's like, what do you have to gain? It's not, if you're going to do MMA, it's the UFC or bust. I mean, Bellator's good. LFA is good.
I think it's the money. It really comes down to that. And that's what surprised me is, like, I don't know where Ryzen's getting this money if they can afford Floyd Mayweather. One championship seems to have a lot of money. If anywhere, him fighting that I think would make more sense would probably be over there. But it doesn't matter if it's UFC, Bellator, any organization. It's who's going to pay Floyd Mayweather the most money. I think that's what it really comes down to.
It's a very weird situation for all of us. We see the news break. Floyd Mayweather in Japan with tension, and we see it and we're like, what? What's going on here? And then it all comes out. They're fighting, but we don't know the rules. We don't know if he can kick. We don't know how many rounds it is, and then it falls apart altogether. We'll look back on this in like 5 years and be like, that was a very weird moment in MMA history.
Especially because there was no rumblings about it. Like, I'm just checking my phone and I see Floyd Mayweather to fight for Rizin, I was like, okay, whatever, someone's just BSing. And then you actually see the press conference and the promo, I was like, whoa, where's this coming from? So I don't know. But yeah, I mean, hopefully we'll get some clarity on this, but who knows? Maybe we never will.
My hope is that Floyd's bullshitting. I hope they fight. I hope he can kick, and I want Tension to knock him out with a kick.
Yeah, I don't think Floyd's going to put himself in any situation where it gets rid of this aura of him being this undefeated guy, whether it's MMA or anything. I think it hurts his brand if he loses anything.
Definitely, and you talked about Khabib just for a second, and I've told people on here I don't think there's one person in the UFC who beats Khabib. Well, let me rephrase that. I don't think there's one person in the 155-pound division that beats Khabib. People bring up Tony, people bring up other people. Tony Ferguson got held down, and I'm a huge Tony. I'm a big fan of everybody. I love Tony Ferguson. El Kukui, I've got his season of The Ultimate Fighter. I've watched every fight. He got held down by Kevin Lee. If Kevin Lee can hold you, he held him down for that whole first round with a staph infection. Kevin Lee had staph and still held Tony down for a full round before he got tired and got finished. If Kevin can hold you down, Khabib can. So, but besides that, I don't think anybody beats Khabib at 155. And what's next for Conor? What do you do if you're John Kavanagh or if you're Dana and you call Conor? What do you say to him? Do you say the trilogy with Nate Diaz? Do you bring up maybe a rematch with Aldo at 155? What's next for Conor McGregor?
I think you have to give him a fight that he can win, or a fight that he would be more competitive in. I think they have to be very careful with this next matchup here, because what you don't want to happen is what happened to Ronda Rousey. Ronda Rousey loses to Holly Holm, and then they give her Amanda Nunes, which is a horrible stylistic matchup, and she's out of the UFC. Her career is basically ruined in MMA because of one bad fight, basically. Well, two, I guess, if you count Holm and that. You don't want to do that to Conor. If Conor loses, his brand is not going to be the same. You have to think of that at the end of the day. If people forget, if Ronda Rousey fought anyone else on the roster besides Amanda Nunes after the Holly Holm loss, she might still be in the UFC. She probably would have beat anyone else on the roster other than Amanda Nunes, because Amanda Nunes is a step. Maybe Valentina. Valentina might have beat her, but I think that in general, Ronda probably beats like a lot of the Raquel Pennington or someone like that. Like she probably beats most of the people there. With Conor, you have to give him a fight that he can win. I think he can beat Nate Diaz again. So that's a fight. You might want to cash in on that now, because Nate's not coming back anytime soon. Dana's sort of been like, I forgot about him, this and that. If Nate wants to fight, he knows that because he has that win over Conor, he has the power. So he's only going to come back and take a big fight. So I think it's either Nate or Conor, the trilogy, cashing on that now. Or I think a fight against Justin Gaethje would be very interesting, because here's the thing. Conor's not a guy who, I know he got knocked down by Khabib in the fight, but he's not a guy that gets knocked out, easily. He gets submitted. His ground game's not very good. Imagine a fight with him and Gaethje, a fight that I think he could win. And, it's very entertaining for the fans. It's a winnable fight. And there's also that whole history there, too, with Gaethje being managed by Ali Abdelaziz, who also managed Khabib. There's a storyline there as well, too. So I think that's another option, but you can't give Conor a Khabib rematch. You can't give him Tony Ferguson. You can't give him Dustin Poirier. I think those are all dangerous fights for him. And I think Gaethje or Nate Diaz is the right option next.
I definitely agree. You got to be careful. If he loses this one, you're in trouble. He's still Conor, and I've argued for Conor, been accused of Conor dick riding, Conor fanboying. Let's say he fought Khabib, he fought Floyd and he lost. He fought Khabib and he lost. Let's say he fought Nate's next and he loses. And then let's say, fuck it, I'll do a fan fight and do Gaethje, and he loses to Gaethje. That still, and then retires on a 4-fight losing streak. That still does not get rid of the fact that he knocked out Jose Aldo in 13 seconds. That doesn't get rid of the fact that he dominated Eddie Alvarez. First to ever two-weight world champion at the same time. Beat Nate Diaz in a 5-round. You know what I mean? Like, people, when Conor loses, people say he ain't shit, he hasn't accomplished anything. I believe if Conor loses his last 4 fights and retires, he's still one of the best. He's still Conor McGregor. He still did things and done things that has never been seen or probably will ever be seen in the sport that we follow and love, MMA.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. You can't take anything away from that, and just the the fact that he sort of put Ireland on the map with MMA, and there's so many things that go into what he's accomplished already in the UFC. But again, if you want that brand to be worth more, you got to win fights, and him losing against Khabib was a big hit to his brand. So he needs to bounce back, especially the way he lost. It's like, there wasn't a moment in the fight where you felt like Khabib was in trouble. I mean, Conor got dominated, and I think he has to be careful with who he fights next.
You're the only one that I've heard say Gaethje. I say Gaethje or Pettis, because I believe Conor would beat Pettis, and Conor needs a win. You need to give him somebody where it's competitive, it's entertaining, but Conor pulls it out.
Right. Pettis isn't a bad choice. I just wonder when Pettis is going to return. He's had, I think he hurt his hand again in that fight. So, it could be a while before we see that. That makes sense as a former UFC champion, Pettis against McGregor. You never know. We'll see what happens next. But, they got to be really careful with this.
Yeah, and our final topic before I let you get off here is it's kind of awkward and weird news breaking. UFC has talked about for years 125 being gone, or people don't watch it, people don't care about the little guys. And personally, I watch all weight classes, but when you start getting to men's 125, women's 115, you're not as die hard as you are on 170, 155 heavyweight. It's different. It's just different with the different weight. You've got your favorite weight classes. You, me, Dana, everybody's got their favorite weight classes, and it just seems like the little guys don't get much love or respect. Do you think they should get rid of 125, or they don't got rid of Mighty Mouse? Your star is gone. I think you should. But maybe bring it. It's weird. It's very weird. Maybe just take it for a year or two and bring it back, or maybe when it's gone forever. How do you feel about this?
I mean, I hate to see anyone lose their jobs. I mean, I talked to Jared Brooks and Jose Shorty Torres yesterday. I mean, it's unfortunate that neither of them are with the UFC. I'm trying to line something up with Justin Scoggins, another guy who got let go. I'd never like to see anyone lose their jobs. I think the flyweight division, unfortunately, I look at two sides of this thing. Okay, so I look at the UFC side of this. Could they have done more for the division? Absolutely. There were times when they had contender fights in the flyweight division that were on the prelims. You can't do that if you're going to build up a division. You need to get fans interested. They needed to put more of those high-profile matchups on pay-per-views and get people excited about it. And the other thing, because there's potential for good fights. I mean, they had the Demetrius Henry Cejudo fight was a fantastic fight. I mean, that was awesome to watch, and we needed to see more of that. So there's that side of it, and then the other side of it is just that they never had a Conor McGregor. They never had someone in that division that got you invested into it. Conor brought life into 45 when Aldo was kind of stalling things up a little. I mean, people forget that Aldo was sort of like not liked at a certain point because of the fact he didn't speak English and he wasn't doing a good job selling the division. And all of a sudden, Conor McGregor comes around and really flips things over. 155, you could say Nate Diaz sort of changed things over after Benson Henderson sort of made the division a little bit boring, or so to speak. And if you go even before that, Frankie Edgar when he beat BJ Penn, that made things interesting. 170 has always been entertaining. You had St. Pierre, and you had Lawler, this great comeback story, and the list goes on. There's just been division after division. 185 with Anderson Silva. Every division has had something that has really captivated us, but that never was the case with 125. So I see sort of both sides of it. I think this could be one of those things where maybe the fans that weren't too eager to tune into flyweight fights now will have to, because you're not going to watch it in the UFC. You're going to have to watch it somewhere else. So I think this could end up being better for the flyweights in the long run, maybe make more money, have fans that appreciate them. But I think as far as the bottom line goes with the UFC, I mean, I think the UFC does too many cards anyways, so them losing the flyweight division, maybe we'll get more quality, but I doubt that's going to happen because it seems like they're just hell-bent on just giving us as much as they can. So I guess my thoughts on it is, yeah, I'm going to miss it a bit, but I also get that it wasn't really captivating fans, so it's a business and they have to make a proper business decision. I've
got Justin Scoggins coming on Monday. I've got him Monday on my podcast. I'm going to talk to him about all this shit going on. Same boat. I understand it, but I wish they wouldn't. It's kind of, they had the Mighty Mouse. You had opportunities. You had chances. But Mighty Mouse is not, he didn't really draw that much for some reason. It's weird, Anderson wasn't really that famous until he front kicked Vitor, if you'll remember, and then... Well,
I'd even go further than that, actually. I think what made Anderson in the 185 division was Chael Sonnen, right? I mean, without Chael Sonnen, I don't... That was after Vitor.
Yeah, that was after Vitor.
I think. Was it? Yeah. Anyways, because it was towards the end, because it was Sonnen, and then it was Weidman, of course. But I think Sonnen was the guy that put sort of 185 on the map and got people interested. Because Chael Sonnen, I mean, if you remember when he first was at the UFC the first time, I mean, he was fighting at light heavyweight. No one knew who he was, and it wasn't until he went down to 85 and sort of surprised some people. I remember he got that win over Nate Marquardt, and then he started calling out Anderson. That really sort of, got people interested in the division. So every division needs that, and I think that unfortunately there was no one like that at flyweight.
Chael Sonnen has a win against Bisping. People forget that sometimes. I remember
exactly.
Demian Maia choked out. Demian Maia has a win against Chael Sonnen by triangle. That's a way back in the UFC days, but I ultimately agree. We had Mighty Mouse at 125, but I always thought that Mighty Mouse should have been at 135, because you remember he fought Dominic Cruz and was there a little bit, and then they brought in the 125. I think that if Mighty Mouse could have adapted and adjusted, you didn't beat Cruz, but Dominic Cruz, you're talking about arguably the best 135-pound fighter ever as a male. I think Mighty Mouse would be more. If I was Mighty Mouse, I would have offered the UFC, hey, if you're getting rid of 125, I'll go up to 135.
Yeah. Well, I don't think that I mean, the two are connected, but I don't think Demetrius left to go to one because of any sort of inkling of them getting rid of the division. I think his coach does a lot of work there with one championship, and he'll get appreciated more. And they just signed that esports deal with one championship, so it's a better fit for him. I think part of Demetrius probably thinking of leaving the UFC was probably the Reebok deal, because he was sponsored by Xbox, and that went away after the Reebok deal.
Yeah, they probably all intertwines. I wonder if they did kind of tell him, "Hey, we're getting rid of your division." I wonder if that ever come up before he left.
Probably could have been. We're thinking about it. I think ESPN. I mean, Jared Brooks had this theory, and I sort of agree with him. I think ESPN's like, nah, we're not a fan of the lower weight classes in MMA or boxing, so we're going to get rid of that. We want more entertainment value fights.
Which is crazy because you know how it is at events. You get fans booing jiu-jitsu sometimes. You get fans booing when people are... I like to watch fights go to a decision sometimes. I like watching jiu-jitsu grappling matches where there's no striking. I like watching, the intricate details of fighting where the casual and the regular audience who you want to appeal to just wants to see knockouts.
Right, exactly, and like a good example of this is I remember like some of Demian Maia's fights. I love watching him fight because he's so good on the ground, but people don't like it because they're like, oh, he won't stand and trade. Like the Matt Brown fight's a good example where people probably didn't like it, but I liked it because Brown, for a while there was defending the submission, and then he gets choked out late in the fight. But that's what's so cool about it, is that Demian Maia is such a chess master. He can figure out the right time to land in the submission, and I find that very entertaining.
James, thank you so much for your time.
My pleasure, man. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on.
Definitely, man. And I got your info and stuff on Twitter. I'll hit you up again, and we'll do a recap episode soon. Anytime, man. You want me on, you hit that DM button, and I'll be available. Yes, sir. Thank you so much. All right. Thanks, man. Have a good one. James Lynch, MMA journalist. Pretty cool dude. Go to his Twitter page. And he's got interviews with everybody. I mean, I think he actually works for the UFC. If he doesn't work for the UFC, he's at every UFC event, at every fight. Was ringside for Conor Khabib. Was there for John Jones at Gustafsson 1. Go check him out on Twitter, James Lynch. But anyway, this is Hank with Smoke Break MMA. Thank you guys for watching.